Boom. And we're live. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Men with Purpose. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Graedon Parker. So, Graedon is an entrepreneur, the co founder, and the creative director of Organic Mechanic. Organic Mechanic is a local grassroots company with change making built in its DNA. In addition to that, Graydon also leads Om Brotherhood, which is an organization that exists to create a container for men to cultivate masculine well-being as a medium for collective healing and community transformation. With that being said, Graydon, I want to welcome you and very grateful for you being here and doing this together.
Grateful to be here, brother. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. I like to start these conversations usually with just checking in, taking a deep breath and just doing a quick check-in. What is present for you right now?
Yeah, bro. What's really present for me right now is feeling of transformation. Really coming into a new space within myself, with a lot of different things, with my artwork, and also just with the work that we do with the brothers. A lot of things happening, so I'm feeling like a caterpillar inside a chrysalis. And yeah, a few feelings of a little bit of anxiety for what that might be and what that might feel like. And a whole lot of gratitude for being here with you, brother.
How to that. I'm feeling, I always say the same thing because I'm incredibly grateful to have this kind of pleasure and honor and gratitude kind of all bundled and mixed up together in this kind of magical concoction that we kind of have in the conversation. So I'm super grateful, man, to be able to do this, you know. Awesome. All right, before we kind of dive into a little bit more about the Brotherhood and Organic Mechanic, could you tell people a little bit about your kind of story, how you started, how you discovered men's work, etc.?
Yeah, man. I think the first kind of men's circle that I was involved in was my rugby team at high school. I'm not sure if you guys play much rugby over there.
A little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot of tackling, a lot of, bravado. And I just, when I think back to the first Brotherhood experience that I had was, in the changing rooms with the bros before we went out onto the field. And our school was a Scottish school, and that's part of my ancestry too. So we'd always have the bagpipes playing as we ran out onto the field. And there was just this real sense of connectedness between us, and this strong bond as we ran out onto the battlefield, basically.
Wow.
And then after the game, we'd meet with the other team and basically connect with them over food. And so that was the first real sense of brotherhood for me. But I think what started to create more depth with that was after university, when we started our business, Organic Mechanic. And there was 5 brothers, all of us from that same high school as well. None of them were in my rugby team. They were all soccer players. But we lived together and we ran our business together. So we had regular circles. And I didn't realize that what we were doing at that point, but we were really regularly checking in with each other's emotions and dealing with emotional charges that would come up between us.
Wow.
and also dealing with the house and all of the chores and the kitchen and everything, and also
Mm.
with the business too, and
Mm.
having our own spheres of um, influence
Mm.
within that organism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after a few years, we've been doing it for 7 or 8 years now. We
Wow.
started to incorporate fire and nature and
Mm.
other elements into that those sacred meetings that we'd have, and we started to invite more brothers in and just really see and feel the value of coming together as young men, and just opening up and sharing and realizing that we all have pretty similar problems.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Dude, this is, I mean, sounds like you've taken a super mature approach. Five guys living together, doing business, which for people that maybe haven't started the business or people that have a business and have business partners could be a very tricky thing, right? You're essentially almost like having a marriage. Like this is how intense it is together. And to be able to have this awareness of, all right, we need to take a moment right now. We need to kind of check in with each other. Is it's pretty intense, pretty challenging thing on top of running a business. Um,
Mm.
wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. Right. So you're kind of doing this without even calling putting labels like men's work and circles and all this kind of thing. You're just kind of doing it because you needed it, essentially. Is this correct?
Yeah, it was just an essential part of our communication, and
Mm,
yeah, we didn't realize until later. Um, it was after I met a brother named Devon.
mm,
From he's part of Sacred Sons, but at the point where I met him, he was traveling around New Zealand,
mm.
and I just met him in an organic cafe, and we just hit it off, and he ended up coming and staying at our place with
Mm-hmm.
us, him and his girlfriend at the time, and he had done a bit of this kind of stuff, and so he really helped us go a little deeper and start
Mm,
to bring some techniques and other things
mm-hmm.
into the mix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I stayed in touch with him over for 3 or 4 years, and he ended up being involved quite heavily involved in Sacred Sons, which
Mm.
I'm sure you're aware of that crew.
Yes.
And then I went over there to the USA in 2019 to be involved in the convergence, which was
Nice.
just next level.
Next level, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
for
man.
people that know Sacred Sons, giving them a shout out is this kind of conscious men's organization which kind of promotes men's work, the return of the father archetype, as they put it, and pretty much everything related to men's work. They are kind of a big proponent, especially in the US, not so much in Europe. I think that they're doing some events in Australia from what I've seen, but mainly in the US and North America. So yeah,
Mm,
shout out to those guys.
yeah, the brothers.
Yeah, the brothers. Yes, yes. Right. So talk to me a little bit about actually let's dive into organic mechanic, because then we can dive into also the Om Brotherhood as well. How did everything started for you with organic? Because I know I did a little bit of research prior to the call, so I know there is a bit of a backstory to that.
Yeah. Um, I think it kind of it evolved from after the rugby game,
Mm,
right? Where we'd come and we'd share a kai, share food with the other team,
mm,
and then after that we'd just drink alcohol. It was just part of the culture to just get really wasted as young men, which at the time I thought was, that was the thing.
yeah.
That was how we have fun, and that habit kind of carried into university.
Yeah.
I ended up going down to Wellington, here in New Zealand, and went to the university to study graphic design.
Mm,
I was blessed. I always knew I wanted to be an artist, so
mm,
I went down there to do that, and just kind of carried on that binge drinking culture,
mm, yeah.
and then combining that with the huge deadlines, the late nights of staying up to finish assignments, all
Yeah.
nighters, and also not really knowing how to take care of myself in the way of how to cook good quality food and get the nutrients my body needed. So I was just drinking beers and eating really shit food. And then, yeah, combined with the alcohol culture and experimenting with all kinds of other things too, my body just began to shut down. And I got something called glandular fever, which isn't it's a fever which affects all of the glands in the body. And I just, for months, I had a voice, like a croaky voice, and coughing, and just all of my sinuses were blocked. And it got to a
Wow.
point where I just couldn't, I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired, basically. And in my last year of university, I did a project called Education Not Medication, which was, it was basically the evolution of that journey, and realizing that to truly heal our bodies, it's about prevention, and it's about creating healthy habits, and it's also about taking our education into our own hands. Because when I did have glandular fever, I went to the doctor, to my family doctor, and they just kind of took one look at me and started prescribing me antibiotics and
Oh man.
steroids and all kinds of things. And like, I think there's definitely a place for that, for those things, and at times they've saved my life. But there is certain times where, you know, it's just, there's other things to do before we start taking those pills, which really affect our gut health. And that was something which was a huge part of that too. Was at the same time they diagnosed me with something called irritable bowel syndrome, and that was because I had lots of bloating, lots of like difficulty excreting, and all kinds of things. And I went home, and I just didn't feel right about that diagnosis, and started researching myself, educating myself about what those terms and why I could have got sick in the first place. And I realized that irritable bowel syndrome is just like a blanket term for a whole lot of symptoms about the gut which
Yeah.
are not necessarily understood. And so I started to really research into the gut microbiome, and a man named Hippocrates was a huge influence. He said something, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And that was the one, was like, okay, I really need to clean up my diet. I really need to stop drinking alcohol. And then Hippocrates also said something, all disease begins in the gut. And that's just, this was over 2,000 years ago. And it's as true today as it was back then, because most of our immune system is in the gut. All of the bacteria which helps us to digest and assimilate nutrients is all in the gut. So that became a key focus of my practice. And after university, I came back home and teamed up with a couple of my really close mates from school whose their father had passed away from cancer. And on that journey, he had retired as the CEO of a big company, and he'd started meditating. He started drinking green juices. He started doing positive affirmations and all kinds of things, and he had made a huge influence on our lives as young boys.
Wow.
So that was another part of the inspiration which brought us together to then create Organic Mechanic. But it wasn't just about the well-being. It was about how can we create a business or a lifestyle which enables us to be in full control of what we want to do in the world, and not be working on someone else's dreams and be unhappy in a job which we hated. So
Wow.
that's the origins of how it came to be.
Beautiful. My My partner has something similar. I think she also has irritable bowel syndrome, and she kind of gets all these like aches and pains in the stomach. And the funny thing is, she's studying to be a doctor, so I think she understands this much better than me. But I think she's also kind of realized how placing healthy diet. She doesn't even smoke. She's not like a drinker or anything else. But really placing healthy diet at the center is kind of the root and building the foundation for improving that potentially, etc., etc. Can that actually maybe I'm not sure if you know, but can that actually be reversed, that irritable bowel syndrome, or it could be just improved?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself that through a diet of lots of vegetables, lots of prebiotic foods, which are the foods which help to create the healthy soil in our gut for the probiotic bacteria, which is things like coconut yogurt, sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi, kefir. All of these fermented foods can come in and really seed themselves into the gut. I know that there's lots of other treatments as well, like colonic hydrotherapies to wash out the bad bacteria. There's also something called a FMT, which is a fecal matter transplant. I'm not sure if you heard of that, but basically you get a healthy poo and you put that into someone else's gut biome, and the bacteria from that helps to really seed the bacteria in the gut. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Science has really improved a lot in that respect. I got it.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. All right. So you've been doing organic mechanic. You've been doing organic mechanic for what, 6-7 years now?
Yes. 7.5 years.
Wow. It's been quite the journey, I'm sure. And I can see like I saw some of your talks, you seem to be very kind of focused on sustainability, connecting back with nature. And, we're kind of very much, there's a lot of there that's intertwined, and a lot more about sustainability. And I can really see that also kind of with the brand, going hand in hand with the brand, decreasing the actual waste, etc. That's like super. Everything seems to be very, very aligned there, man.
Yeah, bro, for sure.
Yeah. So out of organic mechanic, which is kind of the abbreviation for Om Brotherhood, when did this start, and how did, like, I think you kind of mentioned already at the beginning, but how did you decide to kind of start Om Brotherhood?
Yeah, man. To give that some context, I'll tell you about how we started making products and things.
Sure.
So when we decided to create the organic mechanic, we were trying to figure out what's the key product, or what's the product that we could make that's going to get to people. And we realized it was an organic smoothie. So we started at a local farmer's market with a little marquee, a tent, and just some tables and some chalkboards, which I did our menus and things. And we started just blending a whole lot of organic ingredients and making these smoothies. And they were a hit, man. And people just kept coming back, and we just slowly started to build a regular base of people. And at that point, which was about 2013, that it was mostly women that would come down, and that was because of at that point, I just think women were just so much more ahead of the game in terms of taking care of themselves. But slowly they started to bring their boyfriends, and other men would hear about these 4 guys who were just turning up there every day, and they started to come down. And so we slowly started to create a community around what we were doing. And because of the focus on the gut health, we started to brew kombucha. And that enabled us to go from being a market stall to being on the shelves and retail stores all over the country. And so we started to really build from there. And in terms of what you were mentioning about sustainability, we started
Mm.
to really take responsibility for the packaging that we were putting out into the world. And so we made everything refillable and put refill stations in certain areas around the city to make sure that people could reuse their packaging and just come and refill the
Wow.
bottles.
Wow.
So with the community really helping to encourage those healthy habits, and then when we started throwing alcohol-free parties that were just fueled by booch,
Wow.
just at our house, and just got a few mates who were musicians and things to play.
Mm.
And then we started creating more and more events, and we put on a festival and all kinds of things. And where the Brotherhood came in was after COVID, or just before COVID, really. After one of the festivals which we went to, I just realized there was nothing really like that. And this was after I had got back from the States
Mm.
with the Sacred Sons, and wanted to help to create that space here. And so we put on an event, and got a few brothers who were already in New Zealand from coming to this event,
Mm-hmm.
that were really strong pillars in things like breath work,
Mm.
yin yoga.
Mm.
Um, we had some amazing Kai. We had some of our brothers, um, who really could hold down the kaupapa Māori elements of this. And when I say that, I mean the traditional ways of the indigenous people,
Mm.
the Māori people here of Aotearoa,
Mm.
really bringing those elements into what we do as a key, fundamental basis for how we work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so we slowly started to put on events. We put on one and had about 80 men turn up.
Wow.
Um, and then what happened after that was we were all locked down all over the world. And I was
Yeah.
just super grateful for that time that we had brought those bros together, because
Mm.
we had created this container, which we've done 4 or 5 other big events like that since then. And
Mm.
just continuing to go deeper and create a more succinct offering.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. I'm surprised of the turnout that you had in terms of like 80 men. Generally, or maybe at least here in kind of Europe, men seem to be a little bit less susceptible to this, even though it's quite a potent word. Maybe there isn't enough awareness, which I think other also men are trying to change. But did this come very natural? Like men, because I have a few guys, I won't call them friends yet, but they're also in I think in Perth in Australia. They seem to be kind of gathering quite big groups and doing their thing and jamming and going in deep with men's work. Is this kind of a well-known how to say work back home, or is it just because of the community that you've built already, people kind of resonated and just showed up?
Yeah, I think here in New Zealand, traditionally, it's not a big thing. And
Mm.
traditionally, men don't cry, men don't talk about their feelings,
Mm.
and yeah, just drink a lot of alcohol, and don't really go into those spaces.
Mm.
So doing this kind of work is, there has been a lot of transition between that. So it is quite new in that sense, that there could be a space for men to come together, and alcohol is just not involved, and
Mm.
they can go into their feelings.
Mm.
Um, there is a growing community that goes to these alcohol-free events, and um, that's into things like yoga and healthy eating and
Mhm, mhm.
booch and
Mm.
gut health and things. And I find that, and composting and all of that. So I find that those people they're way more open to this kind of stuff. But there's also another group of men who are living in that world, but they just kind of feel that loneliness within that world of, you know, drinking and connecting in that way. And to have the experience where the alcohol is not playing a role is quite new, and it really can open a lot of doors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember similar thing I experienced when I was living in Thailand, and then in London I went to a static dance, and there you just go, you kind of jam, you do your own thing, both men and women. But then you kind of finish with a bit of a cacao ceremony. You kind of open up with cacao, and then you kind of finish with some fruits. And this whole idea of no talking, no shoes, just dancing, and then no alcohol was very a little bit wow, like wow, really people do that? And you kind of see this kind of community that is exactly interested in all those kind of topics and more. Just come there and yeah, you can kind of see people who maybe live a little bit more alternative lifestyle to some, like to majority of society may see it as that way, but it just resonated. It just clicked, and I was like, wow, that's my thing. So and then exactly like you have other men who are kind of maybe stuck a little bit more in a regular 9 to 5 slash corporate job, just feel empty. There's nothing there, right? Everybody's kind of chasing achievements, whereas they need fulfillment actually. All right. So you've been doing this, what, you said 4 or 5 events of that, and then everything's been kind of locked down. Do you do kind of any other events online or?
Yeah, we've done a few online gatherings. One featuring Devin Fredrickson, actually, who he talks a lot about sexual sovereignty and just really honing into that topic for men, shame and sexual shame and things like that, which was really successful. And I think we'll probably do more of the online stuff, especially because brothers can't make it in person all the time, and there's a lot of bros here in Aotearoa. So to reach more men, I feel like that online space is, there's a lot more to tap into. But for me, you just can't beat looking a man in the eye and in person and having that experience.
Yeah, I think for me, once I was kind of exposed to this kind of work, it's just like an open something that it's like it's impossible to kind of not have the same willingness, the same urge to experience again, right? For me, it's such a potent thing to kind of step in a container, and you're not too sure exactly what's going to happen. You know, it's going to be a lot of challenge. You know, there's going to be a lot of somatic releasing and like screaming. And I mean, yeah, from what I read, you guys tend to be using a lot of modalities, a lot of different practices, kind of utilizing the body, the breath, and then you take men on a journey.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
dude.
totally.
Dude, that's awesome. What would you say is kind of the biggest thing that maybe the biggest takeaway that you had from being exposed to this kind of work?
Yeah, I think the
Big
biggest thing is
questions.
like, yeah, it's like, yeah, asking that one, it's like, it's really the reflections and within myself of the things within me, which I have not reckoned with until coming to the point of discovering this work, realizing the patterns within myself that were not so healthy, and having the accountability of other men around me to really hold myself to that higher standard. Yeah, really choosing to live the example and set the standard, and to help other bros to find that place within themselves. I feel like is a huge part of the purpose of why I do this work. Yeah, the biggest, one of the other biggest takeaways, reading a couple of those books, part of this movement. You know, there's one, Iron John.
Oh,
by
Robert Bly. Yeah.
Robert Bly. I got so much out of that book, and I still go back and read that. And I did a mankind project weekend a few months back, and a huge part of that kaupapa, that body of work is referring back to that book and the patterns from childhood and understanding the psyche of men that's developed over the last couple of 100 years. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Aaron John, King Warrior, Magician Lover, maybe David Data, The Word of Spirit Man. There's a couple of good books that I think you can just spend the next 10 years rereading, because every single time you read them again, there's just like another thing that pops up and you're like, oh, like this is totally different book I'm reading right now.
Yeah.
Dude, wow. It's yeah, there is nothing like being in a physical space with someone. It's difficult to explain with words. So this is kind of a constant theme. Everybody that I speak to or interview on this podcast, everybody says, you know what, man, it's like really difficult to describe with words. You know, it's just like you gotta feel it. Paradoxically, most of the men don't want to feel. They're like, oh, like stay away from me. What is that kind of? That's the kind of the doorway to really having a much deeper experience of life, I think. As corny as maybe this sounds a little bit, but yeah. Yeah. All right. Dude, is there something that that you would, how to say this, I had a question totally like flipped out of my head. Anyways, can you talk a little bit about the value of having someone like this in a man's life, like to be able to be exposed to this kind of work specifically for another man who's never seen something like this? You touched upon this a little bit. So I'm talking perhaps specifically more for younger men that need a little bit more guidance, that need this kind of mentorship from an elder, fatherly figure, or just someone who's been through that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, I take a lot of the cues of that from things like Iron John, where he talks about in indigenous tribes all over the world where there's still a practice where the elder men in the community would come in and take a young boy at around the age of 12 or so and really just steal him away from his mother and really create that clean break from the feminine. When we were born, we're nurtured and fed by the feminine. And it's really important for a young boy to really make that clean cut away from his mother and spend time with elder men, and not just his father, although the father is crucially important. And watching a lot of my bros, my business partners, both have kids now, all boys, and just watching and observing how these young boys learn and grow, and how important it is for the uncles to be around, you know. Not just the father, but the uncles. And I'm sure you guys would say this over there too, that it takes a community to raise a child.
Yes, very much so.
Super important for those male role models to be around, and as well as that, also for these initiatory rites of passage to be present for the young men to really have a situation where they can experience their own courage, their own sadness. They can really start to get in tune with their own emotions in a way which, if they weren't in that initiatory place, then they would maybe perhaps never know how to connect with those emotions. So I feel super important for young men to have access to these
Mm-hmm.
initiatory weekends and rites of passage and things. And I feel like that's a huge part that is missing, especially here in Aotearoa, because we have one of the highest rates of youth suicide in the world,
Wow.
and especially for young Indigenous men. And a huge part of that is to do with colonization and the effects of that still happening. Displaced communities, lack of land and access to the things which they had before the colonials came here and just took all of the land,
Wow.
and really disrupted the natural ecosystem of the people and of the land, and that's still playing out here
Wow.
today. And one of those symptoms is the youth suicide, and there's no sense of belonging for these young kids. And for a lot of them, like all communities involved, is like for a young boy to feel part of something, it's either like they'll look for that in a gang, they'll look for that sense of belonging,
Yeah.
gang, or getting involved in things which are not so healthy in the long term for them. And yeah, so I think that's a huge reason why there needs to be more of this work, especially for the young boys, and
For sure.
for the men to stand up and be role models in this area.
Especially now more than ever, with what's kind of unfolding in the world with COVID, with COVID, the pandemic, and all these kind of things. We really need more male role models to step up and lead the communities into kind of a much better, more secure kind of future. One of the first episodes I did of the podcast was with a gentleman also from New Zealand. His name is Kevin Heelas. So he was talking about how important it is for the boy to be around the father and other kind of male role models, because the boy learns through what the father is doing, and also because he really likes to cook. He said that food is such a big part of this, right? Sitting down across the table, having a meal together, not just with his son, but also with the whole family in this kind of whole communal area. I up until that point, I didn't really understood the significance or the value of having a role model and a male role model close to you as a boy, but also being able to kind of learn through experience, learn what the father is doing, and being surrounded by other male figures, and actually sitting down and having food together, kind of having all these kind of mini rituals, if you will. Super important.
Yeah, bro.
Kind of like what you guys were doing in, back in the days of the rugby, right? You'd go and get some weed, get some food, obviously it's slightly different, different version of that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Is there let me maybe kind of wrap things up. Is there a question that you wanted me to ask you, but I didn't?
Nothing comes to mind, brother.
No, nothing. Okay. Good. I always like to kind of ask these questions before we kind of wrap things up. If people want to know more about what you're doing with Organic Mechanic, with Om Brotherhood, where could they find more about you and the work?
Yeah, bro. So on Instagram, you can find us at The Organic MC, and then the Brotherhood work, Om.Brotherhood, and then you can find me Ed Not Med, Education Not Medication.
Nice.
Yeah, man. We got the booch, we got all the superfoods, we got everything you need to build a healthy body, and help to maintain that little patch of land where you
Wow.
live into.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Amen,
More
brother.
personal sovereignty. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, bro.
All right.
All good.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Graydon, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm gonna put all the kind of links to the website, to the Instagram handles, into the show notes. And again, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Ciao.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Likewise. Ho.